Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah, not as good as you guys with your fancy talking leap
Yeah.
background, but I mean, not bad.
Yeah, appreciate it. We're trying to make up for the lack of professionalism here to make it like look like we know what we're doing. There's a lot that we wanted to talk to you about.
Sure.
The two big things, your competitive history and then your involvement in the business side of things. And we have a lot of fans and a lot of people who probably listen to this who they don't remember watching you compete as an individual. So let's go back to pre 2008. How did you find and get involved in CrossFit?
So I was working at a conventional gym at the time. This is like 2000. So I graduated in 2004. So 2004 through 2008, I was working at a conventional gym, maybe even a little bit before that. And I started getting into sales and whatnot. This is when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually it was before, because I was in high school working at the front desk. So then I was in high school, I was in college, I was working the sales. And one of the gentlemen there, his name was Austin Begibing, which you guys both know him.
Mm-hmm.
He started working sales as well. And his mom actually turned him on. I want to say it was 2006. I'm pretty sure it's 5 or 6. And so she said, hey, you got to check out this website, because she had been doing Olympic weightlifting and was introduced to CrossFit.com. And so he was showing me it. We would just get inspiration for workouts for a while. And then finally, like 2007, we started doing YouTube battles, which this is actually, most people don't know this, but back in the day, you had this guy, OPT, who won the CrossFit Games in 2007 at the Ranch in Aromas. At that point, I had just been getting into CrossFit and I wanted to kind of challenge him. It was like a friendly challenges we did on YouTube. So you can still search these like Khalipa versus OPT versus guy Bionic out of Florida.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys remember these, but we would do like these little YouTube battles. And that's how I started getting into it and kind of if you look back at some of those videos, it's pretty horrendous. And so I got introduced to it, started training hard, and then competed at the 2008 CrossFit Games back in Aromas, and ended up winning that one.
Yeah, I remember because as a fellow Santa Clara alumni, I remember hearing that in 2008 after right after graduation, be like, no way, Santa Clara grad just won the CrossFit Games, as I was starting to find it through those YouTube channels. So you just kind of talked about the entire confluence of things that eventually led me to CrossFit. I think you were actually wearing a Santa Clara t-shirt on the podium at the games that year.
It's so funny you say that. Yes, I was wearing a Santa Clara University white, like kind of like Under Armour type shirt, because at the time I had just a week prior signed a lease for our first gym that was originally called CrossFit Santa Clara, but I didn't have any shirts. I didn't have anything. So I'm like, well, the best option for me is just to wear this thing that says Santa Clara, and maybe people will put 2 and 2 together. So that's what I wore. I wore a Santa Clara University shirt to represent CrossFit Santa Clara.
And I find it interesting, you mentioned that your competitive career and the business side of things essentially started around the same time. And then what became the focus as you're trying to balance this? I just won the CrossFit Games and I'm trying to launch my affiliate kind of moving forward at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, some would say it was great timing. It was great timing. It was great timing because I won the games. It gave me a little bit of notoriety. And yes, so like we started off in a very small location. 6 months later, we moved to a bigger location. And that was just the start of something really cool for many, many years. Yeah, for sure.
2008, you are famous for, having that comeback in the final event. For people who don't know, it's an every second counts format. And they started the leader, like if the leader had a 45-second lead, like that guy went out first and the next guy went 45 seconds later. And, the only video that exists of you winning the CrossFit Games is from your father. What do you remember about going into that final event?
Well, it's funny because the day before, I believe there was 3 events on Saturday and 1 event on Sunday. And so I remember it was Saturday late night and they're like, hey, we're going to announce the final event. So Boz was there and Kasha was there and they say, hey, it's going to be a squat clean and then a jerk at 155 for 30 reps for time. And I remember, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I said it or someone else said it, hey, do you need to break up the squat clean into the jerk or can you make it one motion? And early on, this idea of like a cluster or a squat clean thruster just didn't exist. And we had been working it, Austin and I had been working that for a little while. And so I was familiar with this idea of squat clean thruster at lighter loads. And so I was like, hey, well, if I do that and don't pause on the jerk, it's going to really help my time. And so that was kind of going into the event the next day. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and squat clean thruster these as long as I can. And then once I can no longer do that, I'll switch to a squat clean and then a separate jerk. And that technique ended up, helping me out. It's funny. You guys remember Matt Mursky that year?
Oh yeah.
Dude,
oh, yeah.
Probably my favorite. I mean, I have a lot of we're talking like definitely CrossFit competition fans here, right? But it's like, dude, I remember I'm sitting in the corner. This is Sunday, and Mertzky's in an earlier heat than me, and he's dropping the bar from like chest level, and it bounces off the floor. He catches it at like hip height, and then squat cleans in. And I remember he was like maybe 7 reps in, right? And I look over at Austin. I'm like, hey, bro, I gotta do that, right? Like I need to do that. It's gonna save me a bunch of time. And then sure enough, Cash was like, hey, every rep that Matt just did doesn't count.
It became called the Mursky after that.
Oh, 100%. He created his own movement.
Yeah. Oh man, that's and in that documentary, there's kind of like this famous moment where they're lining up for the final heat, and Dave's given the brief, and he didn't recognize you as someone that he expected to be there. He's like, I thought he was in the wrong heat. And little did you know, the guy that's about to blow everything away and win is kind of lurking in the shadows. And I'm curious, mindset wise, everybody felt like it was Josh Everett's event to lose at that point. And I'm curious, what was your mindset knowing that, hey, I got something in my back pocket and I'm about to shock the world?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the back pocket was like I had seen some people doing the squat clean thruster. It wasn't like some like surprise. It's just they just couldn't sustain it for that long. I think they decided, okay, am I going to start that way and then switch, or hey, I'm going to start with the clean jerk the entire time. And so for me, I'm in the warm up area or whatever, and the biggest shocker for me at the time was I had never in person seen an Olympic lifting shoe. And I know that sounds weird, but I had never in person seen that. And so when I saw OPT, a couple of people wearing Olympic lifting shoes, in particular Everett, I remember asking like, hey, what are those? Because they had those old school do-ins on. Remember those?
Mm-hmm. Wooden heel.
Wooden heel. And I was just like, dude, what are those? And like, oh, it helps with this. I'm like, oh man, now I'm already in a less advantageous position. I don't have the right shoes on. But that event was really, it'll never be redone again, ever in CrossFit Games history, because of the way the event's structured. So because the time domains were all so short, it really favored someone with this more kind of anaerobic. They're very short, right? And the way it was structured was this idea of every second counts. So the final event, the idea was whoever won that event won the overall thing, which I thought from an excitement spectator perspective was epic. But they couldn't really do that nowadays, right? Mm-hmm. But when I started off, if I'm not mistaken, Chris Spieler started like 2 minutes before me, or something like long enough where it's like, dude, I'm watching this guy. And so he is probably right in front of me. And then it went down the aisle to the right. Then it went back down the aisle to me. And so there was probably, I don't know, 6, 7 people in front of me. And I just remember when I started, Spieler was like on 12. And Everett was like on maybe around the same or whatever. And I just remember thinking to myself, okay, boom. And then you're listening to the announcer, you're kind of doing your thing. And it was like, okay, Spieler's on 20. I'm like, whoa, I'm already on 10. And it's like, Spieler's on this. I'm like, oh, I'm already on whatever. And then that's when I realized, it was probably when I was at number 25 that I realized, oh my gosh, I have a legitimate shot at catching and winning, because I was listening to the announcers because they were doing a really good job talking about what number Everett was on versus Spieler. So that was really exciting. Yeah. Anyways, good times.
What was the sense that you had about the future of the sport of CrossFit and the CrossFit Games when you were there in Aromas in 2008?
I mean, at the time, none of us really knew. I think when I really felt like we made it, and I still don't know. The sport's gone a lot of ebbs and flows, right? For me, when I really feel like we were at like our pinnacle of a sport, and again, I'm biased because I was part of it, was probably 13, 14, 15. That seemed like it was like the pinnacle of the sport. And you really felt like we were on to something. Like in 11, 12, you started seeing it 10. When we landed at the Home Depot Center for the first time, it was like nothing else, because you go from '08, I won. And then 2009, I took 5th place, but it was also at the Aromas.
Mm-hmm.
Now the prize purse a little bit more, you had more people there. And so it felt like, okay, there's some growth here, but it still felt like we were just on a ranch. Then 2010, when you show up at the Home Depot Center and you're actually at like a real stadium, that was really something profound. I look back at images of it and it's like practically empty compared to the way it was 11, 12, 13, 14. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, like, as I grew at the sport, I felt like we were really making it when we landed in Home Depot Center. And then again in like 2012, when the tennis stadium was just erupting, that's when I knew, like, oh shit, this is cool.
Yeah. There's something about, and I want to say that one of the reasons why you became a fan favorite is I think you had both the ability to kind of reinvent yourself from year to year, along with the kind of puncher's chance mentality, where it doesn't matter what happened in the previous event. It didn't matter what happened earlier in the competition. You were always there ready to like make that charge. 2009, I don't know if a lot of people remember, tough go at the run, made an amazing charge back that year to finish 5th. 2010, you talk about the Home Depot Center. One of the kind of iconic visuals is Amanda and the struggles with the barbell at the end. Actually, you almost killed me with the barbell on the floor that year. And I'm just kind of like curious, because I think we've all been there where we've pushed ourselves to that brink and then still be able to come back. Was that something that you trained in? What was your kind of mindset around those type of moments and being able to kind of stay in the pocket despite those kind of mishaps?
Well, 2009 was really tough. That was a tough pill for me to swallow, because if you had done the scoring in any other way than the way they did it, I would have won. So that was really hard for me to swallow, where this one event dramatically impacted me. But at the same time, like, I'm not taking anything away from the people who beat me. Like, I lost fair and square. It was just a really tough first event, because I come in as a previous champ. I had trained really hard and I was just overzealous, couldn't control my nerves. And this first, 10K hill run was just miserable. And I went out a little bit too hot, tried to keep up with the pack. And I was overly, I don't know. And I just passed out. I just couldn't handle it. I just fell on the ground. Coming back from that, though, was a really cool moment for me, because it helped me earn my confidence I would use for the next 10 years to come. That when your back was really up against the wall, a lot of people could talk about it, right? But it's like when my back was really up against the wall and I was laying on the floor, passed out, and it's like you have two options, like you either finish or you just give in. It was nice that, like, looking back on it, it was a cool moment for me that I did want to finish. I did want to complete it, because that was a commitment I had made to myself. And so, I learned a valuable lesson that year, but I still didn't fix the problem. So I learned a valuable lesson. I didn't fix the problem. So then in 2010, I go in there again. I come off of 1st place in 08, a 5th place in 2009 with the Spirit of the Games award win. And then 2010, again, I'm overzealous. I'm probably one of the favorites to win. I'm coming in too hot. And that day, what I made a vital error of is the event was in the evening underneath the lights. And that was the first time we had the jets fly over. They're playing the national anthem. It's like, dude, we have made it. Like, we're here. Again, too hot, too quick. And so then I started seeing a sports therapist, and then I started really trying to work on myself and understanding what was in my control, out of my control. And those things really helped me for the next X amount of years.
You've been around for sort of the evolution of the training of a games athlete. When did training really, change for you from being kind of all right, I'm going to go in and do the class, to this is now a full-time pursuit for me?
Probably like 2010, 11, 10, probably 2010. Because in 2008, it was like, okay, no, like, we're just doing our workouts every day. 2009, we started training a little bit more, right? And then it's like, okay, we're going to the Home Depot Center. There's some real money, but there's also just like more people are getting better. We need to get better with it. And that's when, we started training a lot harder. And then we started surrounding ourselves with some amazing people. Like between 2010 and 2015, I mean, I was very fortunate to have amazing training partners at NorCal CrossFit at the time. And that cohort really helped create the energy to build something special. And you see a little bit of that now with what Mayhem has and other people have. But at the time, I think we were kind of like the first kind of group of people that were all trained together.
Yeah. And simultaneously, that's also pouring back into your business as the affiliate. I correct me if I'm wrong, around 2010 is when you guys moved again to that bigger spot. I think, was it 2 stories?
Yeah, we had 2-story in like 2009. So I think 2008, we were one place, we moved into another place in 2008 again. 2009, we moved into a double decker, which is probably one you're talking about. That was cool.
Mm-hmm.
That was a cool spot with like a little arcade upstairs.
Yep.
And then 2010, we started opening more locations. We ended up getting the one with all the racquetball courts, which was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys remember that one, but
Yep.
and then I started teaching seminars for CrossFit, and it was just really an interesting time. At that point, I didn't have any kids. It was all about competing. It was about traveling every weekend for CrossFit certifications and owning the gyms.
Yeah. And what did, I would say, what was the focus as far as business wise during that time? Because I mean, the evolution of the affiliate has gone back and forth, over the last few years, and what it means to be a CrossFit gym or a fitness facility in 2020 looks vastly different than it did in 2010. And I'm curious, what were some of the guiding principles for you back then, especially as you're balancing being effectively a pro athlete at that point?
I mean, back then, I lived, breathed, slept CrossFit. And I mean, all day, every day, right? We owned multiple CrossFit gyms. I taught seminars every weekend for CrossFit wearing a red shirt for years. And the model was over service, but I brought my sales background to that. Meaning, I started in sales at a conventional gym. So when we opened a CrossFit gym, I always was under this impression to provide for my family and then provide those opportunities to other people. So I've always had this entrepreneurial sales side of me that wants to grow our business and do what I love for a living, but also then grow that thing. And that was a little bit different early on in CrossFit than what other people. There was a lot of people back in the day that would just have garage gyms and would kind of be anti-businessy of it. I looked at it from day one as a business because I was trying to provide for my family. And that was a little bit of a different mindset that we took to it back early on.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide after 2014, you had a fantastic showing at the games on the podium again? Why did you decide then to make the transition to team?
Yeah, that's a good question. So 2011, my daughter's born. Mm-hmm. 2014, my son's born. At the time, I'll just go back to 2012. I think was the first year that we had a London Invitational, maybe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So from 2012 through 12, 13, 14, I competed year round, like literally year round. I did the Open, I did regionals, I did the games, and I competed for Team USA. And then I also did like additional, remember the CrossFit Tour, yep, those kind of things. And it started to take a toll on us because in 2011, we signed a major corporate wellness contract with, it was formerly HCST, now it's called Western Digital. And we were opening locations globally. So I had a few conflicting priorities in my life, right? One is obviously I'm married and I have my daughter. Then we have our business that's expanding globally. And then I'm trying to compete and win at the CrossFit Games. And for many years, I did these different things. But then it started to put a little bit of stress on my relationship because I'd be the guy waking up early, training hard in the garage, midday doing a crazy session, and then at night getting in some stamina work right before dinner, coming in all sweaty. And it would always cause a tiny bit of friction for years, right? And it started to kind of compound. And so my wife and I, every year after the CrossFit Games, we'd go on a vacation. Because that's the end of like the formal season. The invitation was a little bit different. So, the Open was always pretty stressful. We've had different, sanctionals and whatnot. The Open was kind of stressful. The regionals were extremely stressful because even though I won my region every year, it was very stressful because there was only so many events. So if you messed up on one, you were done. So leading up to regionals, all day, every day, I would be practicing those events and trying to put myself in the best position to win. And that's all I was thinking about. And so my family was being kind of put third, right? Because it was like competing, business had to whatever, and then family. So after the 2012 CrossFit Games, my wife was good. After 2013 CrossFit Games, my wife's like, hey, we probably need to think about where the end of this road is. You have the business that's really providing for our family. This competing thing, you never got into it for the money. So don't keep doing it now for the money, right? You never got into it for that. And so 2014, I finished that year. And she's like, hey, I'm just letting you know, I can't do this anymore, right? I just can't. And, when your wife comes to you like that, right? You just, there's no like debate, right? It's like, hey, and so then I said, okay, well, like if you can't do this, what about team? And she was okay with that. So she actually had me sign a formal contract that she took a picture of. I gotta find it, that I wouldn't go compete individually again. Now she let me get off the hook for the Legends event in at the Rogue. But we have a formal agreement that I can't compete individually anymore.
I like it. Yeah. She took a page right out of the sales from the Globo Gym thing, get that contract signed and get you squared away. But
it was tough though, just to kind of, it was tough because I won in 08. I had some top finishes, and then in 2013 was a great year for me. I took second, and then 2014 to take third. It was tough to pivot to team. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, I placed either really high or won the Open the next year. I don't know if I won, but I got really high. In 2015, it started making you think like, oh man, should I compete individually? But once that commitment was made, So it was not easy to pivot to team, but it was the right decision at the time.
One of the biggest what ifs in CrossFit Games history is 2015. And a lot of people say, if Miranda doesn't get hurt, you guys win the Affiliate Cup in 2015. Two-part question. First, do you agree with that? And then second, have you been able to come to terms with that now that you're, 6 years removed?
So I think we would have had a very strong chance of winning, just by the points and everything. Just mathematically, we had a very strong chance. I don't like to say that we would have won because I don't like people who get second and say, oh, I could have won. It's like, well, then why didn't you win, right? So I think it undermines or takes back a little bit of the people who did win. So I don't want to say that, but I think we had a strong shot. Let's put it that way. Because we came off regionals basically crushing all the teams, and then we were already in the lead by so far at the games. But anyways, hindsight's 2020, right? And there's a lot of areas in CrossFit in my life that, looking back on it, I would have done a few things differently for sure. And this in particular, I would have done things differently. I would have been more composed. I would have, at the time, it's all that mattered, right? Winning is all that mattered. And we were so invested into it. So when Miranda tore ACL, it's all I could think about was how this is impacting our team that trained so hard to get here. And the emotions just took over. And I became, I don't think there was anything I did that was like, completely crazy. But let's put it this way. In hindsight, I would have handled the situation differently. But a bunch of factors led to us kind of having the direct contact with Dave and having, this. And I wish we had handled it differently. Let's put it that way. It was a growing experience for me because I was so focused that I couldn't see the forest of the trees, that, hey, this person on our team just tore ACL. The rules are the rules. We need to move on. But I couldn't see it that way at the time.
Yeah. And I'm curious because, although it was short-lived, your time in the team competition did bring a lot of attention to that area of the sport. And I think it is one of the reasons why we saw that the next evolution of the team competition be what it was. But for you personally, I'm curious, what sort of things were additive to your personal experience as an athlete and your approach moving forward that the team competition contributed? We've talked to, Rich and some other people about what they've learned from switching to the team. And I'm curious if there's anything you were able to glean.
The team was something that I probably could have done for a while because it was pretty sustainable. It allowed me to do the things that I wanted to do, be good at the things I want to do without having to always be thinking about how do I sacrifice one area to get better overall, right? So the team allowed you to thrive in the area that you had strengths in while having other people step up in the areas that you might not be as good at. So that was really fun because you got to do a little bit more of what you wanted to do instead of what you had to do. It also relieved a little bit of the stress and it felt like you were part of a group. That was something I missed, we had a lot of training partners, but I competed individually for, 7 years. That's a long time to, I probably competed, 100 times, a lot of times, right? Sanctionals, regionals, open, hundreds of times, whatever it is. And eventually having a team around you where you feel like you're all kind of going towards a common goal was really fun. I had great support. My family was supportive. Our training partners were supportive, but no one felt the way you felt when you were standing on that podium, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Whereas when you have the team, you do have that where they went through the same struggle. They got up at 5 a.m. to go swim in the Santa Cruz Ocean with you. And there was something really cool about that.
How did having Rich Froning in the sport help push you?
I mean, Rich was a master of his craft, right? He was very, very talented, still is. I think he just wanted, he moved the ball forward in terms of pacing, consistency, and just being a professional. I mean, he was very consistent, very level-headed, really had his total. It's like if everybody was like a Porsche, right? He was like the Ferrari, right? And all he did was make all of us want to build our engine a little bit more to get there. And him and I had some great battles, man. And I think it was good for the sport, right? It was good for the sport at the time. A little bit of battles. It was fun. He did a lot for the sport. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talked about the engine thing, but I do think you had, one of the major contributions to the sport, I think, coming into 2013 in terms of and this goes back to the reinvention a little bit of, you were the first person when you showed up to the 2013 games that really at the upper level was working with Chris Hinshaw.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the look on everyone's faces when you started 3 for 3 on those first 3 events and then blew away the burden run. And everyone was like, where is this Jason Khalipa coming from? And I'm kind of curious how that relationship started. What was the impetus behind the focus training in that avenue?
Yeah, I mean, Hinshaw was a member of our gym in Mountain View, California. And one day I saw him. I was like, hey, man, I heard you, have a triathlon background. And I need to get better at my cardio events. Like when I looked at my previous games, it'd be like top 10, top 10, top 10, top 10, 50th, top 10, top 10, top 10. And I said, hey, look, I'll do anything you say. You have my full commitment, and let's just get this going. And that was the way the relationship started. And it was great for many years. And we then connected him to a bunch of other people. But he really, he made me fall in love with pacing and the track. I really looked forward to our time together. They were very difficult, but those were some really great times that I enjoyed with him. So they helped me a lot, leading into the 2013 games. Those were just great events for me. The 2K row right into a half marathon was excellent. The burden run is probably, top 3 events I've ever competed in. In 2013, I probably had 3 of my top events I've ever competed in because for a variety of reasons, but 2013 was a great year.
We ask this a lot to people whose careers from a competitive standpoint are mostly in the rearview mirror. What are you most proud of when you look back on your competitive career in CrossFit?
This is going to sound super cheesy and super whatever. I made a commitment when I was first getting kind of quote unquote famous in CrossFit that I would never, ever, ever say no to anybody at any time to take a picture or shake my hand. And till this day, that commitment is still there. And because I remember telling myself, this was like back in 08, 09, when things started growing and you used to have people like take pictures with you and like look up to you. It was kind of weird at the time. I remember saying to myself, like, dude, what kind of an asshole would I be if I wanted to say no to that? And there will be a time where no one wants to take a picture or get an autograph from you. So enjoy it while I can, because it will go away. And that was something like, I never put myself in a position though, where I had to say no. So what I mean by that is like, let's just say I had to get to an event. I was like 5 minutes before start time. I'd find a way to kind of navigate so that people wouldn't see me. But if I was just out and about, I would always take those pictures. And I think that's something I'm proud of because it was a commitment I made early on in CrossFit, and it's one that I stuck with.
For sure. And I think what an important element of that is too, is like when you won the games, 22 years old, starting your, really your adult career as a professional, and to kind of balance that I think about like trying to balance something like that as a 22-year-old, young adult is certainly not easy in these days and times. But kind of circling back to one thing you said, and I'm always fascinated. You said like 3 of like, the best events that you competed in were in 2013. I'm always curious, when you reflect back, what maybe 4 to 5 events really stand out to you that, if you put it in your hall of fame there for yourself, like things that stand, whether it was a memorable performance, an atmosphere, an environment, a finish, what would those events be?
I mean, if I have the name, so so the first time we competed for Team USA in London was like epic as epic can be. And that was one of the most highest highs I've ever had. You go there and you were like, I feel like we were the Beatles, because these people had never seen us before. And it was crazy, man. But the events that really stand out to me are the ones that you're going to win before you win. Those are the ones that really stand out. I've won a variety of events before from whatever. And the ones that really stand out are the ones where like the 2K row doesn't really stand out because you're just kind of getting after it and hope you're going to win. But the half marathon, I knew about 2 to 3 minutes before I was going to win that I was going to win because I was just doing the math in my head. And I knew statistically, there's no way that someone was going to be able to catch up to me on the rower just based on the pace I was going. So it was a really fun 2 to 3 minutes because normally when you win an event, boom, you barely win it. And it's like, it's over. But this time I got to actually embrace it and kind of enjoy it. And then the other one was the burden run. The night before the burden run, we went and I don't know if you guys were there, but Castro kind of gave us, the whole team, everybody, kind of a breakdown of the burden run. Hey, you're going to do this. You're going to run over here. You're going to grab this log. You're going to flip this thing, the whole shakedown. And I remember thinking to myself, man, what an amazing moment would it be to come into this stadium first and pull that sled, because I knew that if I got to the sled first, more than likely I was going to win the event, just based on my size and strength and comfort with the sled, whatever. Right? I just told myself this. And so sure enough, the next day, I finished the pig first. I carry that log behind my head first. I get into the stadium and I'm like, don't get comfortable, win, right? But you're running in and the stadium just erupts because you're going underneath this tunnel. And so I pull the sled halfway. And because remember at that time, and you guys know this, there was no benefit to going faster. Like you either win or you take second or whatever, but like winning by 5 minutes is the same as winning by 1 minute. So I stopped in the middle. I knew how hard the sled was to pull. And I just kind of looked around and kind of embraced it. At that point, no one was still in the stadium. And so, I kind of had a moment to be like, dude, I'm going to win this event and this is epic. And then sure enough, someone comes in. I'm like, all right, let me finish this out. Don't get too comfortable here, Jason. But those were a few examples of really amazing moments because I got to celebrate it in the moment versus looking back on it.
Let's shift to the business side of things now.
Sure.
You are one of the few entities out there that has not only built a gym, but also a brand. What is the difference between a business and a brand?
Oh man. I mean, and that's something I'm still struggling with today is this idea of creating an emotion, right? When we want people, and we've had our struggles, right? There's no doubt about it. We started off as CrossFit Santa Clara. We rebranded NorCal CrossFit because we had multiple locations. It just didn't make sense to have CrossFit this, CrossFit that. And so we rebranded NorCal CrossFit. And then years ago, this is like 2016, we rebranded NCFIT to be more indicative of what we offered. We weren't just offering CrossFit. We had a variety of programs. And in the beginning, it was very difficult. You talk about brand. NorCal CrossFit was a brand, and it created and inflicted an emotion. And when we rebranded it, I didn't realize what that was from a business perspective. And it's taken us many years, but we finally now have the right staff, the right awareness, that we are currently back on track building the NCFIT brand. And what that means to me is a group of these just people are getting after their workouts. It's this idea of putting an effort over everything. It's hardworking people. And that's what the brand stands for to me. Now, what does the business do? It does a bunch of things, right? We have corporate wellness, we have brick and mortar, we have digital, but the emotion is what I'm fighting for from a brand perspective. What is, when you look at Talking Elite Fitness, what triggers you? What are you thinking about? And that's what we're fighting for. Like Yeti. Yeti's the best example out there right now. They're a cooler company, but they inflict an emotion. That's what we're trying to do at NCFIT.
Okay.
Totally. And then as far as like the things that you've built so far, you talked about brick and mortar, you've talked about online programming. What are some of the major, I would call developmental checkpoints for you guys, whether it was adding, a soft launch of an app that we talked about a little bit, whether it was adding some digital classes, something, what were some of the things that really stand out so far, the things that have been the major steps forward for you guys?
I mean, some of it has been luck. A lot of it is luck. Having the right people in the right place, the right time, knowing what doors to open up. So when we started off in 08, 09, we started expanding, et cetera. Then 2010, 11 comes around, we expand to corporate wellness. We go from, I think at the time we had like 4 locations. We expanded to 20, right? It was a lot. And if I can go back and advise my previous self, I would have said, hey, make sure you have clear, concise direction for your team. Make sure you're I would have done things a lot differently, right? But when you grow that fast, you're just playing catch up a lot. And so we go and we expand to corporate wellness. We have our traditional gyms. But then what we realize is, man, we need to start putting out better session plans and programming, because everybody's using these Google Docs and we have locations in China, Singapore, Thailand. How are we going to have consistency? So we started creating our own app for our own gyms. And that's when we then started selling that through what's called the NCFIT Collective. This is several years ago. And so each step of the way, we've looked for opportunities that present themselves. And so in the beginning, it was the brick and mortar. Then we started seeing that companies need to create and foster connections. There's no better way to do it than through fitness, in my opinion. So we started rolling into corporate wellness. Then through corporate wellness, it opened the doors to doing NCFIT Collective, which now we have many gyms who use our programs all over the world. But then when COVID hit, and this is even before COVID, we had an end user app, right? Where people could do our workouts from home and whatnot. But when COVID hit, we realized just the importance of being able to reach our message to a larger audience. And so now we're hard launching our newest app, the NCFIT app, which is going to be a whole new next level for us. So we're going to be able to touch people here in the Bay Area. We're going to be able to work with other people through licensed partners in our gyms, corporate wellness gyms. And then now we have our end user app that we're really excited about.
This is a really interesting time for brick and mortar gyms. And we were talking about this a little bit before. And I heard some statistic or some poll where, I don't know if it was Pew Research, but someone reached out to people who have gym memberships and have, for whatever reason, whether it be their gym closed or they just decided to work out at home, and asked them if they planned on going back to their brick and mortar gym. And a significant amount, I don't know if it was more than 50%, but a significant amount said, no, I'm just going to probably just work out at home. So in that current environment that we're in now, where more people seem to be shifting to working out in their garage or at home or in their backyard, how do not only your business, but how do brick and mortar gyms survive right now?
Well, the benefit that many CrossFit gyms have, now our gyms don't have this benefit as much, is affordable rent. So the rent is the real killer through this, depending on if the owner got PPP, EIDL. The long and short of it is, if you have a giant nut that's accumulated at 30 grand a month because you're in a retail space, that's a lot different than if you had 4,000 a month if you're in a warehouse space. So I guess moving forward from a high level, the way I look at it is that brick and mortar will always be around. Will always be around because people want those connections. They want to be able to have that relationship. They want to go in and have the best hour of their day, and we want to be able to provide it to them. And I also believe that brick and mortar in the boutique space will always be around because you don't need that many people to love you. You just need to find the right group. Meaning for us to have successful locations, even here in the Bay Area where it's very expensive, if we get 500-600 members, we're doing pretty damn well for that location. The return on sales is pretty high. We don't need 10,000, 20,000 members like maybe a $5 a month membership would. So I believe that people want community. They want to come back. Some of them. Now, based on your statistic, right, we will also see some attrition. So we're going to see some brick and mortars close. So then those members might disperse to other gyms who are, if they're still around, are going to be able to do well. But we as a business at NCFIT, as a brand, we need to make sure that we're mitigating our risk, is the theory. So we don't only want to have brick and mortar, we also want to have a premium functional training end user model for garage gymmers, which we are just releasing, which I believe, clearly, without a doubt, is the best functional training app available in the market. So that's the way we're handling it, is that we believe people are going to come into the gym, but not everybody. And so let's go ahead and meet them where they're at, which is at home.
Okay. How then did you survive, or at least maintain some level of, of status, operational kind of status quo through this whole COVID thing?
Yeah, it hasn't been easy in the brick and mortar. It hasn't. And frankly, being in California in particular has been very, very challenging. The open and the close, it's going to go down in history as forever changing my mindset on business in two particular ways. Number one is that the government has now made it okay to come and shut down your business, right? They've done it once, maybe they could do it again. And this is not a political debate. It's just a fact, right? So we need to be aware of that moving forward. And the second thing is it'll change the way that I look at leases. So moving forward, I'll look at them more in terms of the force majeure language, different types of languages that are incorporated, because it would have made my ability to negotiate with a landlord a little bit easier. So those are things that have changed. But the way we kind of weathered the storm, for lack of a better term, is because we have diversified revenue streams. And so the learning lesson here is that when I was really young, I was probably 16, and I was working at the health club. This woman, Tina, maybe, I gotta remember her name, but I remember she was in and she was selling gym memberships and like selling perfume and like doing personal training. And I would be like, dude, you got your hustle on. She's like, I want to have as many legs to the table as I could get, so that if one breaks off, I'm still in a stable position. And that was pretty profound for me at an early age to think about our business and say, okay, well, we have our brick and mortar, we have our corporate wellness, we have our digital, we're trying to build legs to the table. Now, there's also this argument that if you have too many legs, you're doing a lot of things okay and nothing great, but you just got to find out what those are. And we're grateful that we had a few of them.
And this doesn't have to be super long, but I'm always curious about the influence of atmosphere, right? And particularly in this instance, you know, we're just down the road. We're in Silicon Valley. We're in. How much did that shape and guide the principles that, you know, that steered your business? Being a Silicon Valley resident yourself.
Yeah, I mean, innovation is a part of our culture, right? So if you look at like the NCFIT like core values, right? This idea of like never settles for the end. Culture is first. F is for fitness for life, but I, the reason why I'm bringing this up is I is really represents innovation, right? That's a core value at NCFIT because we're surrounded by innovation all over us. Right now we're on Zoom. This is an innovative product that wasn't here, 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so as a business, we need to constantly be open-minded that business moves fast this day and age, especially digital. And we need to be open-minded enough to at least listen and innovate where it's needed. And so, yes, I think living in the Silicon Valley has definitely changed my mindset because I'm surrounded by people who are constantly thinking about how do we elevate versus just stay where we're currently at.
What advice would you give to affiliate owners out there right now who don't have your level of not only diversification, but just resources? What advice would you give them about how they need to survive moving forward in this new gym climate?
I think every gym owner needs to reflect like, hey, why am I in business? What are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish? Okay, if you're trying to accomplish, you want to exit one day, well, then how do you make your business as desirable as possible to get an exit? Or, hey, I'm going to be in this business for the rest of my life. I'm going to buy the building and then pay it down. And that's my exit. But I think now, especially where CrossFit's at, I'm 35, right? I got into it. I opened our gym at 21, 22. My goals and aspirations at 21, 22 were a lot different than where they're at 35. And so I think each gym owner, especially those who got into it early on, need to do a reflection, say, hey, what are my goals? What am I trying to get out of this business? Okay, once we check that, then we can start working towards a path on getting to where we want to get to. One of the biggest struggles that I'm seeing in the affiliate community right now is that people some of them want to sell their gym, but they're realizing that their gym really isn't worth anything because they are their gym. And so if you want to start building a business and not just a hobby, you need to find a way to get yourself out of the business so that it could run without you, because then eventually it's worth something. So I guess I'd kind of put it back on the owner and say, hey, what are your goals? And then how do we take steps in that right direction? Anybody, that's a very complex question, so they can reach out to me, online.
Yeah. And then along those lines, I know you've traveled all over the world and you've been probably to many affiliates, trained to different affiliates. What are some of the common mistakes that you see affiliates and affiliate owners making that are detrimental to their growth as a business?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to answer that with a very broad statement. Right. It's most owners are treating their business as a hobby and not a business. And if each owner can take those words and think about what that means to them, I think they'll make dramatic impacts. So here's what I mean. When you guys start your podcast, you might have started it as a hobby per se. Like, oh, you're just bullshitting one day. You're like, hey, we should start a podcast. Okay, cool. But then eventually it's like, no, dude, this is going to be a business. We're going to get sponsors. We're going to generate revenue. We need to have a partnership agreement to see what that looks like. But that epiphany needs to occur. Otherwise, you'll just stay in this kind of like snowball effect where it's an open door policy. People come in, they have a shitty experience, they leave. Why do they have a crappy experience? Well, you're treating it like a hobby, so it's dirty. You're not paying your coaches well, so you're not getting good talent. It's this big revolving door process. So each owner needs to say, hey, am I treating this like a hobby or am I treating this like a business? Because if I was treating this like a business, I would make sure that I had all my ducks in a row before opening. And if you're already open, what areas can I improve on?
Final question for you. There are a lot of reasons, I think, for gym owners and coaches to be pessimistic right now about the future of just brick and mortar gyms in general, not just CrossFit. But what gives you optimism that this is actually, things are going to turn around and that this community will be okay?
Yeah. I mean, look, I want my actions to be reflected in what I'm saying. So we are about to roll out our brand new end user app, and it will be next level. It's on the NCFIT app. It's on the iOS store. So by saying that, it shows that I do believe there's gonna be a lot of people at home or otherwise working out. Mm-hmm. That's number one. But number two is I also believe that brick and mortar can be successful. I do. So if we want to scale our business and move, reach additional people, we need to go digital. That's a fact. But if you're an owner operator who wants to make a fair income and impact 100, 200, 500 members in your brick and mortar, if that's your goal, I 100% believe that's possible as well, which is why we own and operate gyms ourselves. So I guess that's the answer to that question, is that it really depends on what your goals are. If you want to own a single site, right now is a great time because you can negotiate really strong leases. You could get people who just were woken up after a year of being in their houses and realizing how important health is to them. I mean, some would say that right now has never been a better time to open up a gym. And as a guy who owns gyms, we're seeing our numbers, especially even in California, it's a lot more conservative. We're seeing our numbers just boom. And so I would say for anybody who wants to open up an affiliate, open up a gym, right now is a great time. But negotiate your lease effectively, sit down and have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed before you ever commit to anything. This is the biggest mistake I see. I could talk about business for hours, is that we should go to school for as long as we can before we actually end up signing a lease. And I think there's a lot of people that want to sign a lease and get into business, maybe because they're with a bunch of friends and they want to do a partnership. But what we should do is spend as much time learning from other owners, visiting them, taking what we like and learning, and then what we don't like and leave it behind. Because when people open a business, they're not becoming coaches. That's a very important distinction. When you open a business, you're taking on all these other responsibilities, just like you guys with your podcast. You're not just podcasters. You're not just talking. There's a whole slew of things like your Patreon account. Who set that up? Your sponsorship. Who's reaching out to these people? All of those things are part of your business, and a gym owner needs to look at it the exact same way.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple questions. Right.
Sure.
And one thing, I'm always fascinated with the other environmental factors as well. And I know you and your family have been through quite the journey in the last few years. And I'm just curious about the influence and impact of that and some of the things that you've learned along the way. I know, some of the charitable stuff that you've done through Ava's Foundation as well. And I just, if you don't mind touching on that a little bit, because I enjoy hearing about those other elements about that formulate people as a person and how they carry that into the business and the other environments as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for me to recognize that Jason Khalipa, I'm not a CrossFit athlete. I'm not identified as that. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm all these things outside of just this one thing, because it's important that we could identify with ourselves on something other than something directly related to like a performance or something. That I stand for something bigger, like a husband or father, et cetera. And with my children, I want to be the best I can be. And I want to be the most impactful. Every day I ask myself, hey, how am I doing as a husband, a father, and in these other areas of my life? And when my daughter got sick, it really transformed like me, like for sure. When you see the things that we saw and you get the messages that we got, from doctors, it really changes the way you look at you definitely look at, like that idea, like don't sweat the small stuff. It definitely started to be like, even till this day, right? It's left a lasting impression on me because a lot of times we can get so wrapped up in things that really don't have an impact on our life, right? And maybe through social media or whatever it may be. And going through that life experience at the age of, I think I was 30, right? So 30, at 30, I'm actually grateful that we went through an experience like that. I don't want it to happen again. I don't wish we did, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that having my daughter diagnosed with leukemia has impacted the way that I view life for the rest moving on. And that's been helpful. I don't know. I mean, I could talk about that stuff for a while too. I mean,
yeah, for sure. No, totally. And for anyone listening, if you want to follow Ava's Kitchen on Instagram, avas.kitchen as an annual fundraiser, Jason and his family have helped started. And another outside influence, one that I personally pursue as well, that I've been fascinated with, is jiu-jitsu.
I knew you're going there.
and martial arts. So I'm kind of curious as how you got into it and kind of the intention behind it for you and the purpose that it serves for you in your life.
So, when I found CrossFit, and you guys might be the same way, I could be wrong. When you found CrossFit, one of the things that I fell in love with at the time, right, was this idea of complexity and variance. So I liked the complexity. I liked learning rope climbs. I liked the first time I learned a bar muscle up, it was like, holy shit. And then I got my first muscle up. And then you guys remember this, right? And those feelings, those emotions. Then as your kind of CrossFit career, whatever you want to call it, moves forward, you start kind of the new things you learn start to dwindle and the refinement starts to grow, right? But then after a while, I've been doing functional training since 2006, 7, right? I mean, that's a long time to be doing these movements, dedicating my craft, traveling around the world, meeting with the best coaches. I stopped learning new things. And that was hard, right? Because instead I was making small refinements to a movement that I already had a pretty good expertise in. So when I stopped competing in 2016, when Ava got sick, I really missed this concept of like learning new things and putting myself as a student instead of just the expert all the time. And when I found jiu-jitsu, it filled that cup more than anything else. I mean, the way that I feel about jiu-jitsu now is the way that I feel originally about CrossFit, right? It was filling this cup, the community, the culture, the competitiveness, the learning new skills. Now I find that same thing in jiu-jitsu. And I still love training our gyms and all that stuff too. It's just, this is teaching me something new every single day, which is fun for me to do.
Mm-hmm. And I'm yeah, because I had a similar experience with that. And we were actually at a tournament, one of the same tournaments. I saw you walk by, but I think you were about to walk out to compete. So I was like, I probably shouldn't say hi yet because he's about to. He's
in Santa Cruz. Yeah.
Yep. And so, but I'm curious. Like for me, there's that exploration. There's also the discipline and all of those things that go in with traditional martial arts. And I'm curious at what is the, if there are any goals that you have, particularly within the sport or within the training and the mastery, the refinement, all of those things that you're hoping to accomplish through jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm currently a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. So for those that don't know, you start off with this white belt, you stay there for maybe a year or two. Then you go to a blue belt, you stay there for anywhere from 2 years, give or take, 3 maybe. And then you get your purple belt and you stay there for another 2 years before brown and then black. And so I'm kind of at the end of the road. I'm nearing the end of the road of the purple. And so I want to, I'm competing in Master Worlds in November in Vegas. And that's just a good example of me, like CrossFit Games, CrossFit competition gave me so much more than I could possibly like pay homage to. And I speak nothing but high things about the sport because of what it did for me mentally and physically, especially leading into my daughter's diagnosis. But those times for me, I've shifted, I've pivoted, and I still need something that's going to spark that kind of like competitive spirit, give me something to train for, but also a new skill that I want to learn and adapt for my life for the rest of my life. And so that's why I'm setting my sights on Master Worlds in November, which I'm really excited about.
Okay. What's your game? I got to ask, like I'm a half guard guy. I love half guard. I love,
dude, me too.
Playing a little open guard.
Top or bottom?
Oh, bottom for sure. I'm like, the first, so I'm a blue belt. First sequences for me that really clicked as far as like positionally, the things that like I could see the chessboard, ahead of time was half guard, and I developed my game kind of
with
around
a knee
that.
shield or what?
Oh yeah. Knee, like full knee shield. I'll get into deep half if I need to, but that's what I love the most.
Dude, so I love the opposite, right? So I love half guard, but I like being on top, obviously. But yeah. I mean, but you know, and Sean, you're probably sitting like, dude, are these guys talking a different language? That's the thing about jiu-jitsu that's so inspiring is that there's a lot to learn, which is also why there's a big barrier to entry. So, you know, in CrossFit, when people come in, one of the reasons why at NCFIT we've refined down our programs to one called NC Metcon and one called NCX is because what we found is the average person came in like 2-3 days a week. So when we were trying to get them good at all these movements, it was very difficult for us to get them good at snatching when they only snatched once a month, for example. And that's why we refined it down to having less complexity in some of the movements that we're trying to do in some of our classes. But that same thing can be seen in jiu-jitsu. There's so much to learn that when you first get involved in it, for anybody listening who wants to do it, you just got to take it real slow because you're going to want to be great at it because maybe you're a really good strength conditioning athlete, right? But you're going to suck and everybody's going to suck. And you just got to be consistent. And after 6 months or a year, you'll not regret starting. I promise you, because finally you'll get somebody in a rear naked choke and it'll be like the greatest day of your life.
It really, I mean, he's not lying to you. It really is. And it's actually one of those things I found that CrossFit and jiu-jitsu feed each other very well. And,
very well.
You know, I always felt like at first the CrossFit mindset, it was a curse because of how we charge into things sometimes, and it can get you into trouble in jiu-jitsu early on. But once you learn to kind of like, I liken it to like, I don't know if you're a comic book guy, but like Cyclops, when he takes his like glasses off, his rays just go everywhere and you can't control it. Like that's a CrossFit first stepping into jiu-jitsu. But then you put the goggles on, you learn how to focus that energy and you can harness it properly. Like you start to take off and you see a big difference. That's a great analogy. I think for anybody who does CrossFit, they should explore jiu-jitsu. Anybody that does jiu-jitsu, they should be exploring CrossFit as well because they carry over so well. I'm a big advocate for sure.
Cool. Well, Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. And of course, all the best to your family and hope to see you soon, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.